Hello, thank you for joining me here on Stand Up Pete Dominic Daily, your daily dose of enlightenment, information, brain food, hopefully some laughter and entertainment as well. I've got two excellent guests joining me, comedian and lawyer J.L. Cauvin and the editor-in-chief of the ReCount, my old friend Slade Sohmer. Both join me. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you had a great Mother's Day weekend. We did. We celebrated my mom and my wife, Valerie, yesterday. We had a huge brunch where we ate basically 2 meals and didn't have to eat the rest of the day. But there was a lot of laughter, a lot of joy. We ate outside. People were enjoying the nice, at least early afternoon weather. And we had a great time. I hope you did as well. Congratulations to Kim Nyborg, a longtime listener, subscriber, who won for, I think it was the second year in a row, okayest mom in the world. Congratulations, Kim. Not too good, not too bad. Okayest mom in the world. I just love that. I thought it was hilarious. She's got a great sense of humor. And I just I thought that was so funny. She tweeted out a picture. Somebody got her that T-shirt. Okayest mom in the world. Good job, Kim. And to all of the other moms listening, celebrating you, and thank you for listening to today's program. Lots to get to in this first segment. If you haven't already signed up to support this podcast with a paid subscription, hey, today's your day. A few new people come in over the weekend. Always great to have you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. Always start the show with the news, looking back on what you missed, what you heard, a little analysis, a little context. It's time for the last 24. All right, lots of news to get to from over the weekend. India reporting more than 400,000 new COVID-19 cases each day and more than 4,000 deaths daily. Those may be underestimates. And apparently our count is underestimated. It might have been as much as twice what we think. It might have been almost 1 million Americans that have died because of COVID. So those are two huge stories over the weekend. The Chinese rocket did not fall on your house, but instead in the Indian Ocean. A bombing in Kabul, Afghanistan at a girls' school killed at least 50 people on Saturday. Horrifying. At least 90 were injured as unrest continues in Jerusalem, the Arab-Israeli conflict heating up. Shootings reported in Baltimore, New York, Miami, Colorado, and much, much more. But let's start with Saturday Night Live on Saturday night. Controversial host booking. Elon Musk, of course, one of the richest men in the world, hosted, and I guess it wasn't quite as bad as everybody thought it would be. Here's just one of his jokes from his monologue. Let's get us started.
Look, I know I sometimes say or post strange things, but that's just how my brain works. To anyone I've offended, I just want to say I reinvented electric cars and I'm sending people to Mars in a rocket ship. Did you think I was also going to be a chill, normal dude?
And they had some fun at his expense on the weekend update portion of Saturday Night Live as well. Here's hosts Colin Jost and Michael Che.
I don't know if you guys were following the news today, but a space rocket that was spinning out of control just minutes ago crashed into the ocean. And for once, we know it's not Elon's fault. A lot of people have been wondering, why is he hosting our show? And now we know it's because he needed an alibi.
Jeff Bezos' rocket company, Blue Origin, is auctioning off one seat on the first flight of its passenger rocket. Wow. Why are all these rich white people trying to go to space? Look, if there's any Martians watching this, when you see a bunch of foreign ships pull up on your land, take it from a black dude, don't get on them. Unless you want to be a Martian with the last name Washington.
Michael Che, Colin Jost, Saturday Night Live. Good way to start the Monday episode of Stand Up. And now let me get morbid and serious by giving you a report from CBS News. Chris Livesay, who is reporting from India on the horror that is happening there. And I give it about 2 minutes here, so there's some context for you.
Good morning. India's stratospheric death toll shows no signs of slowing. New Delhi announced this morning it's extending its lockdown at police checkpoints like these for another week as cases creep throughout the country and even across India's borders.
The river Ganges is revered as a goddess.
cleansing sins and ushering the dead to paradise. But in recent months, it was a gateway to India's pandemic inferno. Millions of Hindus gathered on its banks at the festival of Kumbh Mela, thought to be the biggest super spreader event ever. Due to religious gatherings, political rallies, and letting down its guard, India is now surpassing 400,000 daily infections for 4 days in a row, says Princeton epidemiologist Ramanan Laxmanarayan.
There's still a huge underestimate of where they are, and every death is just a tragedy because these were all avoidable deaths for the most part.
The virus now shows terrifying signs of catching fire in rural areas where 75% of Indians live, with abysmal health care. Hidden cameras show a hospital in the holy city of Varanasi. Relatives, not doctors, look after the sick, mixed among patients with other ailments. If my wife had gotten the right medicines and treatment, she might have survived, but she didn't get it here, says Pankaj Maria.
They really need to restrict the movement and gatherings in those places.
But so far, the government has ruled out a nationwide lockdown, despite deaths on pace to reach 1 million by August. India is one of the world's biggest producers of vaccines, but only about 3% of Indians have been vaccinated, prompting the government to ban exports and causing a crisis in Africa. Kenya says it will run out of vaccines within days as the continent braces for a second wave, hopefully not as ferocious as India's. And cases are also beginning to spike in neighboring countries like Pakistan and Nepal. Now, here in New Delhi, a leading epidemiologist tells me that the mere local lockdown is too little, too late.
All right, that is great reporting from CBS News' Chris Livesay, who is in New Delhi, India, and I'll continue talking about COVID as it continues to ravage the world's human population, and as well as we still are trying to figure out and understand everything we can about it, how to prevent it here in the U.S. Of course, the answer, vaccines. But the CDC has updated COVID-19 guidance to acknowledge airborne transmission. Did we already know this or not? I get so confused with the guidance here. But yeah, the CDC said on Friday that it updated its guidance to explicitly state that the coronavirus can be transmitted via aerosols, smaller respiratory particles that can float, inhaled at a distance greater than 6 feet from an infected person, particularly while indoors. The new language marks a change from the Federal Health Agency's previous stance that transmission of the virus typically occurs through close contact, not airborne transmission. Infectious disease experts have warned the CDC and the World Health Organization were overlooking evidence of airborne transmission during the pandemic. New York Times notes, and some have stressed, the need for the CDC to strengthen its recommendations for preventing exposure to aerosoled virus, especially in indoor workplaces. Well, I always thought that without any science, so I was always wary of that myself. But there you see how the science can change with new information, new studies, etc. And we got to be able to change and adapt with it, right? Is that too much to ask? All right, let me play you some of the Fauci. Ouch. Dr. Fauci was on both Meet the Press and Face the Nation. But first, here he is with Chuck Todd, who marble-mouthed his way to a good question for Dr. Fauci about the new death tolls.
We got a new analysis from the University of Washington that indicates more than 900,000 Americans have died from this virus. So it's almost double what we were able to track. Just your overall reaction and what does this tell you about our ability to sort of track this virus that we may have undercounted by almost 50%?
You know, we've been saying, and the CDC has been saying all along, that it is very likely that we're undercounting. You know, the model says that it's a significant amount, as you mentioned correctly, 900,000. That's a bit more than I would have thought the undercounting was. But, you know, sometimes the models are right on line. Sometimes they're a bit off. But I think there's no doubt, Chuck, that we are and have been undercounting. What that tells us is something that we've known. You know, we're living through a historic pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen in over 100 years.
Yeah, so it'll have to probably officially pass the numbers from the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. Just crazy, hard to believe, and also a constant reminder to be grateful for all that you've got. At least that's how I keep trying to look at it. And Dr. Scott Gottlieb is the former FDA commissioner. He's always on CBS Face the Nation. This week it was John Dickerson in for the on maternity leave Margaret Brennan. And here's what Dr. Scott Gottlieb thinks about some new masking developments. New developments on masks, not new masking. You know what I mean.
A few weeks ago, you were saying, they should change the mask restrictions for outdoors if you're vaccinated. You're feeling now about maybe changing those mandates for indoor masks. You think they should be lifted, do you?
Well, look, COVID won't disappear. We're going to have to learn to live with it. But the risk is substantially reduced as a result of vaccination, as a result of immunity that people have acquired through prior infection. And so I think we're at the point in time when we can start lifting these ordinances in a wholesale fashion. And people have to take precautions based on their individual risk. They have to judge their own individual risk and decide whether or not they're going to avoid crowds or wear masks based on their circumstances. But we've always said from a public health standpoint that we would set as a metric maybe when we get down to 10 cases per 100,000 people on a daily basis. Well, half the country's there right now. If you want to be more conservative and say 5 cases per 100,000 people, well, by this week, probably about a quarter of states will be there. So we're at the point right now we could start lifting these ordinances and allowing people to resume normal activity. Certainly outdoors, we shouldn't be putting limits on gatherings anymore. We should be encouraging people to go outside. And in the states where prevalence is low, vaccination rates are high, and we have good testing in place, so we're identifying infections, I think we could start lifting these restrictions indoors as well on a broad basis.
Well, that would be an interesting development and set of guidance, says Scott Gottlieb on Face the Nation. So now we head back to Dr. Fauci, and now he's on ABC's This Week, where George Stephanopoulos asked him about Gottlieb's comments there, and I got it for you.
Two people, you've had experts like the former head of the FDA, Scott Gottlieb, say it's time to start relaxing the indoor mask mandates. Is he right?
No, I think so, and I think you're going to probably seeing that as we go along and as more people get vaccinated. The CDC will be almost in real time, George, updating their recommendations and their guidelines. But yes, we do need to start being more liberal as we get more people vaccinated. As you get more people vaccinated, the number of cases per day will absolutely go down. We're averaging about 43,000 a day. We've got to get it much, much lower than that. When that gets lower, the risk of any infection, indoor or outdoor, diminishes dramatically.
Finally, as you know, it's Mother's Day, and there are lots of questions out there about the safety of the vaccines for pregnant women and women trying to have kids. What's your message to them?
Well, if you look at the data, George, there doesn't seem to be a problem at all. There have literally been tens and tens of thousands of women who are pregnant who've gotten vaccinated. There are no red flags, nothing that looks like there's going to be any problem. So I think that that's something that we really don't need to worry about that much. It looks good.
Give everyone a sense of what the country's going to look like next Mother's Day.
Well, George, I hope that next Mother's Day we're going to see a dramatic difference than what we're seeing right now. I believe that we will be about as close to back to normal as we can. And there's some conditions to that, George. We've got to make sure that we get the overwhelming proportion of the population vaccinated. When that happens, the virus doesn't really have any place to go. There aren't a lot of vulnerable people around. And where there are not a lot of vulnerable people around, you're not going to see a surge. You're not going to see the kinds of numbers we see now. That being the case, I think we could approach what we used to remember as normal before all of this tragedy.
Oh, I think I cut him off. Sorry about that, Dr. Fauci. So, final clip here on COVID-related news for you that I wanted to share. It comes from CNN, where Jim Acosta had Dr. Jonathan Reiner on, and they were talking about the danger and damage that Tucker Carlson was doing every night on his Fox News show. By the way, I saw a funny comic. I think Barry Ritholtz sent it to me, like a political comic. It said just a picture of a Fox News set and a director behind the camera, and it says, lights, camera, bullshit. Anyway, thought that was funny. Here's CNN's Jim Acosta with Dr. Jonathan Reiner.
Ask you this, Dr. Reiner. Fox's Tucker Carlson received some blowback this week, and rightly so, from his own colleagues over this reckless anti-vaccine rhetoric that he's been engaging in. Let's watch.
Oh, do we have to? Really?
But no one should ever be forced to take this or any other medicine against their will. And unless they speak up now, unless they resist this, they'll be getting this shot whether they like it or not, and a lot more shots after this.
I honestly don't know what the hell he's talking about, but is this part of the problem in terms of getting people vaccinated?
Yeah, so I think he's really a saboteur. That's what I think of Tucker Carlson. every night he has a million questions about this vaccine. Somehow, magically, he has no one on his show that can answer these questions. I'm willing to answer these questions. And I have a question. I have two questions for Tucker Carlson. Number one, have you been vaccinated? Right. And number two, why won't you tell your audience whether you've been vaccinated? I'm tired of his nonsense.
Oh, aren't we all, Dr. Reiner? How effective, how dangerous is Tucker Carlson? It's hard to quantify. But I'll be talking with Dr. Aaron Carroll about this week. He might have a view that could surprise you. I was talking to him the other day about it. All right, so that is the COVID-related clips from the last 24 hours, all the COVID-related news I could find for you here. But now I want to move on to some political news. And let's start with my favorite Sunday show, which is Velshi on MSNBC, 8 to 10 a.m. East, 2 hours, Saturday and Sunday. He's set to join me this week right here on Stand Up to talk about it all. But let's first listen to the former governor of Florida, former Republican actually turned Democrat. I met him once at a Florida Education Association rally where he was speaking. His name is Charlie Crist, and he has been very critical of the current governor who just signed a new voter restriction bill into law. Here is Governor Crist on MSNBC's Velshi talking about what Rick DeSantis is trying to do.
This bill that Governor DeSantis signed, I think it's really anti-senior because it makes it most difficult for those who use mail-in ballots, of which are very popular among our seniors. My 88-year-old father, my 86-year-old mother really enjoy the opportunity to use mail-in ballots. It's very convenient for a lot of our seniors and a lot of our people. And to make that more difficult is just unconscionable. It's cruel. And frankly, I think it's going to hurt the Republicans, too. So I really don't get it.
Well, I'll tell you what's going on. They're trying to cheat. That's all you need to know. They're trying to cheat in Florida in the next election. And they're also, of course, trying to cheat in Arizona, where they're doing an audit of 3 perfectly executed recounts where everything matched and there was no reason for concern other than they were surprised that they lost in Arizona Republicans. Anyway, here is the Arizona Republicans' Jenna Field. She is on MSNBC's Velshi unveiling some of the private information the conspiracy peddling cyber ninjas firm hired by the Arizona Republicans are hoping to get their hands on for this stupid re-audit, or fraudit, as I like to call it.
What do they want from the from Maricopa County, from the sheriff's office, the routers? What do they need with that?
I'm actually not quite sure what they want the routers for. They had produced subpoenas for a slew of information. I'm talking pages and pages of what they wanted, voter data, election logs. And one of those things was the actual county routers. Now, that, like you brought up, the sheriff here says that would pose a major security risk. They would be able to see detailed information about how our law enforcement works. They would be able to get private information from people living in the county, social security numbers. This is what the county is saying. Now, this is a political fight a little bit at this point, so it's unclear what exactly the routers would give them access to. They want passwords that would give them administrative access to the voting machines. The county says they don't even have that, so they would have to work through Dominion, the private contractor that's come up a lot in this election, to try to get that information.
All right, that is Arizona Republic reporter Jen Field on MSNBC's Velshi. I'll definitely be talking to him about that issue, which he's been covering really well on his show. And lastly, from Velshi, let me play his commentary. He often does like a 2-minute commentary piece, and this one is titled "Big Government is Not Socialism." Here's Ali Velshi on MSNBC.
If you stand for nothing, what will you fall for? Is a famous line from Lin-Manuel Miranda's Broadway hit Hamilton, though Alexander Hamilton may not have said it that way exactly in real life. It is the sentiment that without knowing who you are and what you believe in, you are doomed to be manipulated. And that's the situation in which today's Republican Party finds itself. Remember when the GOP was the party of Lincoln, a party whose very existence owed itself to the opposition to slavery? I know that was a long time ago, but more recently, Republicans have been partisans of themes like law and order, rugged individualism, entrepreneurship, free trade, small government, and low taxes. No more. Today, it is somewhere between a party of Trump, a party of no ideas or policies of their own except the big lie that the election was stolen, and obstructing the Biden administration. This week, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, previously someone so artful in the articulation of his disdain for Donald Trump, said, quote, "I would just say to my Republican colleagues, can we move forward without President Trump? The answer is no," end quote. Wow. A 158-year-old party can't move forward without Donald Trump, a guy who wasn't even a Republican before he ran for office. There was a big clue last August, just ahead of the Republican National Convention, when the GOP decided it would not pick a policy platform, but rather a person who became the greatest liability to the party's future. As strange as that seems, all that happened before Trump started his nonsense about election fraud, denied the outcome of the election, and fomented an actual insurrection. You'd think that after all that, Republicans would turn away, but they can't. Donald Trump is their own personal train wreck. The GOP has, right now, the opportunity to wipe the slate clean, recalibrate the party, find its way back to true conservatism. It'll help the country to have strong parties with opposing ideas, parties that stand for something. Because as the real Alexander Hamilton is believed to have said, those who stand for nothing fall for everything.
Well done. Excellent. Well written, well performed, Velshi. And he will, like I said, be joining me later this week. All right, let me move on to a Republican, one of the ones that's still living partially in reality. He is the governor of Maryland. His name is Larry Hogan, and he made news unrelated to this clip, I believe. Yeah, Maryland Governor Hogan pardons all of state's documented black lynching victims. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan on Saturday granted posthumous pardons for 34 black victims of lynchings in the state between 1854 and 1933, making him the first governor to issue a systematic pardon of all known lynching victims in the state. Hogan made the announcement at a ceremony in Towson memorializing Howard Cooper, a 15-year-old who was hanged by a mob 136 years ago. Cooper was accused of rape and killed before his attorneys could appeal his case to the Supreme Court. Hogan said that studying Cooper's case led me to dig deeper and seek out all of the details in all 34 documented cases. He went on to say, "My hope is that this action will, at least in some way, help to right these horrific wrongs and perhaps bring a measure of peace to the memories of these individuals and their descendants." That's the Washington Post report. And here he is now on Meet the Press, talking about the stranglehold that Donald Trump still has on most of his colleagues in the Republican Party.
Can you explain why the party doesn't seem to hold Donald Trump responsible this? When I say the party, most of the elected leadership, you're an exception at the NGA, RGA apparatus, but most of the leadership doesn't seem to pin this on him. Again, you sort of, the record is the record. Why do you think they don't want to pin it on him?
Well, I think they're concerned about retaliation from the president. They're concerned about, being attacked within the party. And it just bothers me that you have to swear fealty to the dear leader or you get kicked out of the party. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, to me, the most damning part of this, Liz Cheney voted for President Trump's singular legislative achievement. And what many Republicans tell me is very important to protecting. The person that they're replacing her with voted against it. I mean, is the party now what you just said? If you're not with Trump, you're not a Republican?
Well, it's sort of a circular firing squad where we're just attacking members of our own party instead of focusing on solving problems or standing up and having an argument that we can debate the Democrats on some of the things that the Biden administration is pushing through.
And here's some more analysis from Face the Nation. John Dickerson had another elected Republican. So that's why I'm giving you elected Republicans right here. This is Adam Kinzinger. Here he is with John Dickerson.
Speaking of internal divisions, the Republican Party in the House, it looks like Liz Cheney, the number 3 in House leadership on the Republican side, is no longer going to hold that position. What is this debate about?
Yeah, look, it's incredible. So Liz Cheney is saying exactly what Kevin McCarthy said the day of the insurrection. She's just consistently been saying it. And a few weeks later, Kevin McCarthy changed to attacking other people. And so I think what the reality is as a party, we have to have an internal look and a full accounting as to what led to January 6th. I mean, right now it's basically the Titanic. We're like, you know, in the middle of this slow sink, we have a band playing on the deck and telling everybody it's fine. And meanwhile, as I've said, you know, Donald Trump's running around trying to find women's clothing and get on the first lifeboat. And I think there's a few of us that are just saying, guys, this is not good, not just for the future of the party, but this is not good for the future of this country. We're 4 months after January 6th, an insurrection, something that was unthinkable in this country. And the message from the people that want to get rid of Liz Cheney is to say, it's just time to focus on the future and move on. Like this was 10 years ago, and we've been obsessed about it since. It's been 4 months, and we have so many people, including our leadership in the party, that has not admitted that this is what it is, which was an insurrection led by the President of the United States, well deserving of a full accounting from Republicans.
All right, final clip I'm going to play for you on this one. Comes from Fox News Sunday, where Chris Wallace is somehow on the same network as Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, and the rest of them. Does a great job pressing this nut job of a Congressman, Jim Banks. He is a Republican of Indiana, on Fox News Sunday over the House GOP planning to oust Congresswoman Liz Cheney amid her public statements calling out the former president, Donald Trump. This whole clip is almost 10 minutes long. I'm just going to play you like 2 minutes, but Chris Wallace just keeps going after this guy in so many different ways, and here you go.
You are one of the Republicans leading the charge to remove Liz Cheney as chair of the Republican conference, and it looks like to replace her with Elise Stefanik, a congresswoman from upstate New York. I want to put up their voting records because it's pretty interesting. Take a look. Cheney has an 80% voting record from the conservative group Heritage Action. Stefanik's score is 48%. Cheney voted with Trump positions these last 4 years 93% of the time. Stefanik voted with Trump positions 78% of the time. If Cheney is being replaced, and she's clearly, it seems, more conservative than Stefanik, is it just because of the fact that she's not as loyal to Donald Trump?
Well, Chris, let's start with that. No, this completely misses the point about why we need a change in Republican leadership. Let me tell you, Republicans are almost completely unified in a single mission to oppose the radical, dangerous Biden agenda and win back the majority in the midterm election. And any other focus other than that is a distraction from stopping the Biden agenda, from what it's already done in 3 months, sending this economy in a tailspin, the crisis at the border, making America less safe abroad, from appeasing those like in Iran by flirting with reentering the Iran nuclear deal. That's our focus as a House Republican conference. And any leader who's not focused on that, on pushing back against the radical, dangerous Biden agenda, at this point needs to be replaced. But the point here is that we are almost entirely unified on that mission, except for Liz Cheney.
I understand, Congressman. What is it about Liz Cheney that isn't focusing on this mission? She opposes Joe Biden's agenda very strongly.
Well, that has not been as seen as much as most of us in the Republican conference would like to see. As you mentioned, I'm the leader of the largest conservative caucus, the Republican Study Committee. Chris, it's uncomfortable at times, but one of my jobs is to hold my Republican leadership accountable for being focused on the Republican ideals that we stand for and the single mission that we have to win back the majority. And at this point, the reason, Chris, that you and I are talking about Liz Cheney on this important program on Sunday morning is the exact evidence that she's failed in her mission as the chief spokesperson of our party. We shouldn't be talking about Liz Cheney. We should be talking about pushing back against the radical Biden agenda. And this is all a distraction from our ability to be able to do that. That's why she will likely be replaced this week. We'll sort it out. I don't know who will replace her, but that will be a discussion the House conference will have this week that we're going to take up because at this point it's necessary to do so.
I've asked you two questions, Congressman. Why are you unwilling to discuss her criticism of President Trump?
I'm not. And as a rank-and-file member of the House Republican Conference, Liz Cheney or anyone else in our conference can stay focused on other issues unrelated to us winning back the majority in the midterm election. But I know that the belief that I have, Chris, that a majority of our conference has, that she's lost focus on the single mission that we have in winning back the majority to push back against the radical Biden agenda is the reason that she needs to be replaced. But as a rank-and-file member, and make it clear to all of your viewers, Chris, that we're not kicking her out of the Republican Party if she's removed from her leadership post. But in her leadership post, any member of Congress doesn't just represent their district, they represent 212 members of the Republican Conference. And right now, it's clear that she doesn't represent the views of the majority of our conference or the focus that all of us have to win back the majority.
And it goes on and on. What a disgrace that man and all of those Republicans are, because obviously the only difference between Liz Cheney and all of those other Republicans is that she's not willing to deny the truth of what happened on January 6th and the former president's central role in it, and that it needs to, of course, be investigated, because otherwise, as long as Donald Trump continues, by the way, to push the big lie, it's not like the lie is over. He's continuing to push the big lie. That's why I played the Arizona clips earlier. They are continuing to try to convince their supporters, keep them convinced, convince others, I suppose. And this is all about trying to make money. This is all a big grift, obviously, that the president won and Joe Biden lost. And so just terrible what's happening in the Republican Party because of what is making so many Americans believe, which is to not believe at all in anything remotely close to reality. All right, that's all the news clips I've got for you in the last 24. Now it's time for everything else with the news dump.
Outdoor party, COVID safe, sparrows in a clump. The sharing avian flu on today's news dump.
Sparrows in a clump, sharing avian flu. Another great news dump jingle by Pete Coe. Thank you, Pete. All right, let's start in the East Coast, where the Colonial Pipeline, the principal transporter of gas and diesel fuel up and down the East Coast of the U.S., was temporarily shut down on Friday after its operator, Colonial Pipeline Company, learned it was the victim of a cyber attack. The attack reportedly involved ransomware and appeared to be limited to information systems as opposed to operational control systems, but the investigation still in the early stages, and analysts aren't expecting this stoppage to negatively affect fuel markets. I did notice, apparently, and there are reports that gas at the pump is going up, though, if you haven't noticed. These electric cars are looking better and better again, aren't they? U.S. Navy has seized weapons shipment that was apparently bound for Yemen. On Sunday, the U.S. Navy seized a major arms shipment in the Arabian Sea that was apparently headed into the hands of Yemen's Houthi rebels. The Navy's initial investigation found the ship carrying thousands of assault weapons, machine guns, and sniper rifles came from Iran, according to the Associated Press and American defense officials, but I would probably look for some independent reporting on that story. The war in Yemen has killed around 130,000 people, including 13,000 civilians, and created one of the worst humanitarian disasters in the world. The jobs numbers came out on Friday, and apparently they were not nearly close to as good as they were predicted. The U.S. economy added 266,000 jobs in April. Economists had predicting around 1 million, so they're only 800,000 jobs off of their predictions. It's never a really accurate prediction. You got to wait till the numbers come in. But unemployment rate increased slightly from 6% to 6.1%. This is interesting. I want to dig into this with some economists. Maybe this week, economist Justin Wolfers said that only 266,000 jobs being added would be fabulous in normal times, but it's pretty disappointing compared to forecasts. Big miss that changes how we think about the recovery, he said. So we'll see if that is an aberration or what the cause for it is. But if you are hiring, go to Indeed.com/standup. How about that for a plug? Capitol Police said Friday that there's been a 107% increase in reported threats against members of Congress compared to last year. I wonder why that could be. And I wonder if anything should be done about it. I saw this story, and I'm very confused about this, and the hunters who listen are going to have to explain this to me. I grew up in the country with a lot of hunters and a lot of turkeys. There's turkeys around where I live now. But apparently on Saturday in St. Louis, a hunter shot and seriously injured a hiker, thinking apparently that the hiker, the man, was a turkey. I mean, the St. Louis, the police there are saying it sounds like just a really bad accident. But how do you mistake a person for a turkey? The hunter was dressed in camouflage. Witnesses did not report whether the hiker was wearing bright colors. But, I mean, I really want to know what the outcome of this story is and how this possibly could occur. Also over the weekend, the FBI quietly released a file on Nirvana's Kurt Cobain. Only 10 pages. It's available online. He's now been gone as long as he was alive. Wow. Kurt Cobain was 27 when he died of suicide. And it was April 5th, 1994. I remember it. You probably do, too. And for almost all those 27 years, conspiracy theories have circulated around his death. But now, I guess they're going to continue, according to this article. The file includes letters to the FBI asking that Cobain's death be investigated as a murder. Writers complained that local police never seriously considered any possibility but suicide. And if that's a story you're interested in, then check it out at Rolling Stone, who was the first to report the drop from the FBI. Sad news over the weekend for the Obama family. Their dog died. Bo. The Obama family dog has died, according to the former president. The black and white Portuguese water dog joined the first family in the White House in April 2009 and was the last presidential pet before President Joe Biden's dogs Major and Champ joined the White House this year because the Trump family hates animals. Bo died of cancer, according to former First Lady Michelle Obama. And they memorialized her on social media, and it was really sweet, and a sweet but sad story over the weekend. Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets of Paris and other French cities Sunday to call for more ambitious measures in the fight against climate change. Nationwide protests come after the lower house of parliament this week approved a climate bill aimed at curbing greenhouse gas emissions that environmental activists say does not go far or fast enough. That's a story I want to follow and an action I want to copy here. And the good old US of A, smoke alarm manufacturer Kidde, is that how it's pronounced? Kidde, is recalling 226,000 smoke alarms and combination smoke and carbon monoxide alarms after the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission said they may fail to provide alerts about fires. Well, that would suck because that's like the only thing that they are supposed to do. I mean, why wouldn't they just say they're not working? It's not like they have another function. It's not like the fire alarm goes off and tells you the date or the time. Their only function is to provide alerts about fires and carbon monoxide. So, yeah. That's a problem. It's also a problem if you're married to me because when it comes time to change the batteries, I like to take them down and then just leave them there and not put them back up for years and years because I'm a terribly irresponsible man. Anyway, they're being recalled. So if you have one, check out that story. And finally, of course, the Kentucky Derby winner, the horse's name is Medina Spirit, has apparently tested positive for elevated levels of a drug that's performance enhancing, apparently. And the team owner and trainer, Bob Baffert, revealed this, apparently, and said that the horse had never been treated with the drug and is denying it and saying it's a gut punch. So I don't know what is going on with that horse, but the former president put out a statement. And here is today's guest, J.L. Cauvin, doing his best Trump impersonating that statement.
So we're here at the desk of Donald J. Trump, real president. And look at that. The Kentucky Derby was today. I tuned in hoping to see some of the horses run over Mitch McConnell, but didn't happen. And then I find out that the first Kentucky Derby under the fake presidency of the trespasser-in-chief, Sleepy Joe Biden, the Kentucky Derby champion, so-called champion, was on crack. That's what they're saying. The horse was doing drugs, setting a bad example for our kids, okay? You know, I bet you now the left, the radical left, the Sleepy Joes, they'll be saying, oh, we're going to have the horse move into your neighborhood, your nice suburbs, and probably Cory Booker riding on it, passing out fresh fruit from Whole Foods, saying, here you go, kids. Here's Medina Spirit. That's his name, Medina Spirit, handing out crack to our kids, to our great children. That's what you get with Sleepy Joe. Medina Spirit. When I heard that, so what the hell is that? Is that like a Mexican Spirit Airlines? Because, that wouldn't be very strong. And they said, no, sir, it's a horse that's doing crack. And I said, this is what is happening to our country. No, Mike, horse crack. I said crack. You can go back to mother for Mother's Day. But that's what we get. And for this to happen on Mother's Day, you see what Sleepy Joe does? He doesn't care about our mothers. He doesn't care about our suburbs. Just total disgrace, And by the way, why don't I get thanked on Mother's Day? I've made more mothers than most of you, okay? Without me, melatonin wouldn't have a holiday. I'd say to her, darling, you got to go somewhere else. You're not a mother. Get the hell out of here. But I gave her Brendan, so now she qualifies for the holiday. But nobody says thank you to me, but that's okay. But I'm more concerned about the future of our country. We have horses giving out crack to kids with the help of Cory Booker, and nobody's saying a thing about it. So good luck, America. You're so stupid. We'll see what happens.
Good luck, America. You're so stupid. We'll see what happens. Oh, it's so good. I got one more for you. You can always skip ahead, but this is J.L. Cauvin he did a whole bunch of Mother's Day wishes. Here he is doing an amazing impression of Andrew Cuomo.
Good afternoon. I want to say Happy Mother's Day to all our mothers. Even though I am divorced from my wife, the mother of my daughters, I want to wish her, in the spirit of comedy, that's comedy with a T-Y, not with a D-Y. I'll save that for Big Bird de Blasio. But in the spirit of comedy, I want to wish my daughter's mother a happy Mother's Day in whatever level of hell she is currently residing. But as a single parent, I want to reach out to any young single mothers out there who feel like they are in need of companionship. With all due respect, I am available, and though I don't promise you anything on Mother's Day, we may very well have a level of passion that will require you to get a ventilator to assist in your postcoital breathing. But if there are no more questions, have a happy Mother's Day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
Man, he's got that one down. I love it. All right, my latest conversation with J.L. Cauvin. We chatted last night. Also coming up, Slade Sohmer, who is great, editor-in-chief of the ReCount. Really brilliant conversation with him. I hope that you will listen. But check out JL at his website, jlcauvin.com. Of course, he's got 2 podcasts. Every Tuesday, Righteous Frick drops in. Every Wednesday, Making Podcasts Great Again. Check him out on Twitter at JL Cauvin, TikTok, YouTube. Subscribe to him on YouTube, and you can see him at a whole bunch of places that we talk about. Coming up, my latest conversation with the brilliant and hilarious Georgetown-educated lawyer and hilarious stand-up comedian, J.L. Cauvin. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for supporting me and actually listening to this podcast, too. I love that you actually listen. Hi.
Hi. Yes, I listen. I almost never skip stuff. It's a good way to start my day.
That's great to hear.
To the daily podcast while I'm making coffee, the New York Times podcast, and then when I'm sort of settled in for my first chunk of work, the Pete Dominick Show, also known as Stand Up with Pete, daily.
I gave you a shout out the other day when I was doing something sappy. Did you hear that by any chance? I said, should I not do that? Is J.L. Cauvin gonna? I forget what it was now, but somebody will remind us. Well, I'm glad to have you listen. I'm glad when I like the idea that people will want to wake up and listen to it, especially for that news segment. But I would,
if I can, as the ombudsman.
Yeah, go ahead. What is the
editor?
Yeah.
A little less patting yourself on the back about how good you think the news, the last 24 and News Dump are. Maybe you could cut like 2 minutes out of the early portion of the show if you just eliminate. I think we put together one of the great, informative, comprehensive, detailed, well-produced news segments that you're going to find in any podcast anywhere. But, you know.
Well, it's, you know, part of the promotion or drilling it home. You know, at a corporate media company, you'd have somebody doing that line for you, right? And it would come into you. The best news segment you'll see anywhere. You're listening to Pete Dominic. Hey, everybody.
Newsweek calls it the best news segment you'll hear every morning because the show is daily. It's Stand Up with Pete Dominic Daily. That's like when people complain about me. They're like, I remember like last summer, a friend of mine was like, you're doing a little too much promotion of stuff. And I was like, who else is going to do it?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
no.
You know, there's a walk the walk, but there's also nobody knows who the fuck I am portion of this that I have to.
Yeah, you got to mix it up. And if one thing that's interesting is when people maybe you'll do it. Do you share your videos? You share your videos multiple times on Twitter, like your latest Trump making fun of the horse video. You'll share that a few times, and people will see that, and I'm like, you already shared this, or you're doing it too much. Like,
but all of a sudden, you know, Jane Lynch sees it at
right.
11 p.m. East Coast
right.
time.
No, share your best shit
with like 20,000 extra views.
I got no problem with any of that.
Tweet for likes, you know what I mean? Like I want like obviously a like or a retweet on a joke you want.
Sure.
Like, when I share a video, I want views. When
right.
I share like stand-up tour dates, I want people to see that. Not like it's not for ego. It's like no, these are things I'm putting out. Like, and
yeah, you gotta brand. You gotta say what you're doing a little bit, and sometimes it's a little bit, you know, hits people over the head. Speaking of dates, this Thursday, Arlington, Virginia, 2 shows. First show is sold out, but you can catch JL in the later show. Friday, Sterling, Virginia. Saturday, you'll be in Maryland, Rockville, Maryland. And then June 10th, Hartford, Funny Bone. Whole bunch of dates. Go to jlcovan.com to see them. But see, this guy's been joining me forever, and now we're getting back out there and performing, and there are your dates, and hopefully I'll be doing some dates with you at some time in the future. But go see JL this weekend if you're in Virginia or Maryland or know anybody. Tell them to go see him because you're killing now. You're back out there. You're unleashed. You're doing very well. So go see him now.
Thank you. Yeah, jlcomedy.com. The calendar page has the address of
there you go.
The venues and the ticket links. But
go see him. And what do they get if they see you, go to your shows and say, I've heard you with Pete on his podcast? What do they get in that case?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
You'll get a complimentary business card of mine telling you all the places where I am on social media. I'll take a picture with you.
Yes.
And
a discount on a cameo, maybe?
No, come on. Why don't I throw in a Tesla with it?
Well, that seems like a little too much.
I think one of the weird things doing some live shows, because I did my first last Tuesday, it was a bar show, and it was I'm double vaccinated. I have taken precautions. I sat for most of the show with my mask on because I just wasn't prepared to just be like, breathe in all the bar air. I did enjoy walking in Manhattan because there is this mindset of, I don't want people to think I'm an asshole. Like, I want to wear a shirt that says, or like somebody told me a joke, but they were serious, like that they had a friend who had like their vaccination card like on a chain, like hanging from their neck, just to be like, see. But
that's not bad.
But to me, I'm like, I don't want people to think that I'm somebody who's like, I don't need a mask.
Yeah, I understand that.
I'm past that.
That's how I felt as a white man ever since Trump got elected. I'm just, okay, I'm not one of them.
It's not just white man, Pete. It's bald white man with beard.
Yeah, I think
upstate, like not in an urban center.
Yeah, I think you see me and you say, there's a gay Trump supporter. Gay Trump supporter is what it says, I think.
But it was weird being in a bar and just, I didn't want to take my mask off. Maybe that makes me sound like the exact lib cuck that the right might think I am. But it was like, I'll take it off on stage and I'm in the bar. I wouldn't even be in this bar if
you're saying you wanted to leave it out on to comfort others, not for yourself. You didn't feel in any way unsafe now that you're vaccinated, but you felt.
Being honest, even though I know the mask doesn't protect. Like if everybody's spitting on me, I'm done for. But No, I really think I might have had it on as like a blankie. Like
yeah,
a lib,
I think that's a thing.
Fauci blankie.
Well, now we're hearing we're never going to get to herd immunity. We're going to be living with COVID, and it seems like masks maybe they're going to be permanent for seasonably, at least, for people in crowded indoor spaces, I suppose. I'm not sure where else, but it's
the one good thing is it did flu numbers plummeted this year. So in a weird way, even if we had reached herd immunity, you could make a rationalization for, during flu season, I get a flu shot. And then just to really guarantee I don't get a flu to fuck up my month or week, I wear a mask. I'm on the subway or I'm in a crowded place. That would no longer be weird. It wouldn't just be a few Asian women getting weird looks for having masks on.
Right.
It could be all of us.
I want to talk with you about a couple of things tonight. First of all, you've made a whole bunch of Mother's Day videos, some of which I just played here. Very funny, of course. But I got to say, I still love the Trump. I mean, I love all your impressions. I love all your jokes. But I love the Trump because of him. And this most recent video was in reference to the fact that he put out this, what's being called very unhinged, even for him, statement, calling the horse that now we have found out was taking performance-enhancing drugs, Medina Spirit. He called it a junkie. And a lot of people are seriously wondering if he thinks Medina Spirit is the name of the jockey, and the jockey was, and it's a debatable concern.
He thinks Medina Spirit is an African American woman.
That's what he, yeah, that is doing performance enhancing drugs to make the horse.
And trying to compete, actually as a trans African American woman trying to compete against cisgendered horses at the Kentucky Derby.
So what do you make of him still having a real stranglehold on 70% of Republican people who identify as Republicans and most of the Republicans in Congress, to the point they're pushing out Liz Cheney because she is the only one that is not selling the big lie? What do you make of his power and influence, even though he's not even on social media anymore?
Yeah, and I will say, just a shout out to Liz Cheney. She's skyrocketed up my list of Republican women I find morally deplorable, but who I am oddly attracted to. She is climbing that chart.
Is that because of her character, or are you just noticing her looks now?
Well, she's just kind of how old is she? Is she in her 50s?
I don't know. It's gotta be.
No, she's just kind of if you ignore the fact that she's hateful and her dad was torturer in chief, there's sort of a, were you my librarian in high school?
I sometimes feel that way about Laura Ingraham.
Oh, God.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Like an evil librarian. No, but Liz Cheney has a little bit of warmth to her look, even though she's not a warm person. On a cold winter night, I might cuddle with Liz Cheney and be like, hey, how are you?
So she has...
Dana Loesch, though, is number one with a bullet, literally.
Yeah, beautiful women that are horrible people that we are still somehow attracted to because...
it's like somebody took my favorite woman of all time, early 90s Demi Moore, and made her truly wretched, and it causes even more conflict.
Yeah.
But anyway, you wanted to talk about Trump. I wanted to objectify admittedly terrible women. But no, I think it's actually very scary. And I don't say that often because I don't know if we're headed towards some bigger conflict in this country. I don't think we are, but who knows? It's just scary because it means the country because of the United States' position in the world is going to be held up by Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be a more powerful person than Angela Merkel in a weird way for world politics, because she's going to be sort of spearheading this Trump cult that holds us back, that then holds the world back. It's real. Gates and Green are doing a tour, and
they really are. They're out doing appearances, just to be clear, in case anybody's confused.
Right.
Yeah.
And
anybody who would even appear with Matt Gaetz anywhere right now, even Matt Gaetz going out in public, he shouldn't be. Like, it's just seems like a bad idea for him and anybody that would want to appear with him. But, I guess it's strange that doesn't matter to them.
No, I think it's very scary because I don't mean in terms of terror, like for my life, but in terms of, they're going to hold us back. Now, the only benefit to those clowns maybe becoming the brand of the Republican Party is maybe it will wake up Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema on at least a couple of issues.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe. I know. I don't. And the sad thing is, I think people always say, "Oh, Manchin sucks." Like Kyrsten Sinema has I think been more surprisingly sucky.
Mm-hmm.
Manchin was a known quantity,
right?
I think.
Right.
But the replacement, as I've said, of Joe Manchin will be a Republican piece of coal screaming the N-word. That's the next senator from West Virginia if it's not Joe Manchin. So we really have to look to other states. And I saw somebody tweet this a few months ago, and they're right. It might have been the woman who was kicked out for being in a throuple, Katie Hill.
That's right. That's her name.
She, I think she had said, we have to go to other states. We have to get other Senate seats. Clearly we can't. Joe Manchin is very useful because we keep control of the Senate, and people ignored that. At least we can dictate, the Democrats can dictate the action. I know that may not seem like a lot, but things won't even come up for hearings or votes with Mitch McConnell in charge. And I am of the opinion, and I don't know if I've said it on your show before, but there are, and I know it won't happen, but there are every senator and representative that voted to remove Trump after January 6th. What I believe they should do is become independents, caucus with the Democrats, but feel free to continue voting as strong conservatives. Mitt Romney, we don't expect you to support a lot of these things, but at least Mitch McConnell. I mean, the idea that in a year and a half, Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell could conceivably be running two houses of both houses of Congress. Yeah. And that will mean that that's like if Derek Chauvin gets sentenced to time served. If he's been, you know what I mean? If in June, the sentence for Derek Chauvin is, well, considering special circumstances, you are a police officer. We believe you're contrite. Justice has been served. You have been found guilty. Time served. You'd be like, wait, what? With the Republicans, it's how can somebody of conscience be like, oh, Kevin McCarthy should definitely be the Speaker of the House now because he did nothing. He is supporting Trump's bullshit. He's like an active, there's still sort of an active shooter with regards to the Republican Party. They're still promoting the thing that led to the riot. The idea that Kevin McCarthy, so if you're one of the 10 representatives in the House who voted to remove Trump, the only moral thing to do, in my opinion, is to say, I am now an independent and I will caucus with the Democrats because I don't think the Kevin McCarthys of the world should be running the House.
But they would be primaried if they did that.
But you know what? It buys Joe Biden another 2 years of having a Congress that might actually at least even hear some bills and some votes. I know it's not going to happen, but to me, I look at a Mitt Romney, a Susan Collins, what's his name? Ben Sass, Diet Jeff Flake. And you sort of look at them and go, you really think, you think in your conscience, Mitt Romney, you're fucking 70 years old, you're super rich, you have proven yourself to be somebody. I know we'll all hate him on specific things, but when history is written about this era, he will have a prominent footnote as the only guy from that party to vote against him in the first impeachment. And you know what? History is the big moments. When I'm 80 and if I have kids and grandkids, if they're reading a textbook in high school, Mitt Romney will have a paragraph about how he was this sort of voice of conscience in the spirit of his father, George Romney. And Mitch McConnell running the Senate in like 19 months or 20 months is so, it's not scary. It's just so wrong. It's so wrong that I don't know if people will really appreciate, if everybody will really appreciate how wrong that is, that it'll be Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell running Congress.
It's quite possible that could be the case, which is why I think matters. But, going back to your metaphor of the active shooter, I mean, I want to ask you what you think of what you're hearing from a lot of Republicans right now who are saying that they want to move on past the election. They would like to move on. I have a huge problem with that because there has to obviously be accountability. We have to know be on the same page in terms of the election outcome truth. And most importantly, Donald Trump isn't moving on. And this is going to affect every future election. Some people are saying Democrats could get lucky and Trump is complaining so much people just won't trust, the election. Maybe that's what happened in Georgia. But what do you say to all these Republicans who say we want to move on from the election and the insurrection subsequently?
The way to move on is to vote for Democrats, caucus with Democrats, and bury the Trump Republican Party under loss after loss. That's the only way. Complaining about wokeism is not the way to go. And I will say, I read an article and I forget who talked about it recently, but Rutgers Law School. There was a case where a white student quoted a case, and the judge had used in the decision the quote from the black person in the case, the N-word, not with a hard R, but, and the student even said okay, well, this is a quote, but this is what the case says. So even there, you could sense there was the apprehension. That's my dog tap dancing, apparently. You could sense, from reading it, the apprehension in the student's speech for I don't really want to say this, but we all understand, right? It's a quote. Well, no, several first-year law students complained, and it's now a big thing at the law school that this student read during a class from an opinion the N-word in quotes from the case. And that's one of those things where I go, yeah, that's horrible because that's somehow going to become, the woke stuff is going to become a culture issue. But what I think people don't realize is, and if it isn't, something else will become an issue. Trans people playing sports and all kinds of nonsense that they bring up, but they have no platform. There's no Republican agenda based on policy other than you can't, I guess they're trying to say tech companies should stop censoring conservative media. What's the policy there? That people should stop being so woke or politically correct. What's the policy there? These court judgments. I mean, and then finally this trans issue, state after state is voting. The only policy that they're really passing that will have a concrete effect is making it harder to vote. Other than that, and based on a lie, I mean, all these other important issues that have to do with healthcare, employment, education, climate change, voting access, they're not concerned about any of those issues at all. They certainly aren't legislating on them. They're just talking about as you're saying, weird shit that's aberrations and really doesn't have that much of an effect on our lives. Yeah, I think that
because it gets ratings.
When people say it's sort of a media cliche, and I get why they say it, but they go, we need a robust, honest counterweight to the left-wing party in this country for a robust discussion and stuff. And I don't know if somebody said it on your show or if it was, but where somebody was like, it might have been, who's the guy? Thomas Frank. He sort of looks like a rundown Stephen Colbert. He was on Bill Maher. I have one of his books. I'm just making a joke. I don't mean to insult the man. But I think he had said, we do have a right-wing party. It's the Democrats. Now that's a little flippant, but there is a discussion. The Democrat Party is having real discussions on centrist versus very progressive. So I understand the point there. So there is a debate, an honest back and forth debate within the Democratic Party on how to proceed as a country. But the problem is those aren't two sides of the country. That's two sides of one party. The other party, like you said, I'm shocked at how it's really just about power. And I know it is, but in terms of they literally can't articulate anything else. Like you said, it's just, yeah, we want to be back in power. That's why I'm going to pretend like the election was a fake. That's why I'm going to do nothing. I said that what McConnell and the Republicans were trying to do during Obama's presidency, and I think it succeeded. I said they were like suicide bombers. They were going to say, well, nobody likes us anyway, but if we can fuck up this popular president, maybe some of our stink of inaction and ineffectiveness will rub off on him as we hold him from doing anything. And people will go, well, nothing, because there's a lot of lazy and cynical people that go, both sides. I told you politicians.
Oh, I hate it. Nothing drives me. It's the worst thing I can hear at this point. The both sides is bullshit. It's, I mean,
like when people try to bring up, like, I get it. I think defund the police, as an example, is like terrible messaging. It whether or not you stand there righteously and go, when I say defund the police, I mean defund the police. Great. And A, it's not happening, and B, you're just hurting any possible progress.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get people who are on the fence to go, well, I don't want the police defunded.
In a world world that is so in need of detail, that is so inured with a lack of nuance, that type of communication, because of social media and our attention span, there's just no. I can't see a great argument for using it as a communication.
I think it's just, it makes some of the people who use it defiantly, sort of, it lets them be purists. Like, they can stand there and say, I am speaking, I'm not sugarcoating this. And sometimes there's a value in that. Liz Cheney.
Well, there's a value in winning, though, elections. And so slogans and communication matters a great deal, but bad communication also matters. And this is coming from a guy who hates the idea of incarceration and is very radical when it comes to law enforcement and our judicial system. I want to ask you about that. Rudy Giuliani is in trouble. You were joining us for our subscriber hangout a couple weeks ago and had some great analysis, and I didn't get around to ripping that, so I just want to kind of re-ask you what your thoughts were on that, because you're a former prosecutor, apparently. I didn't even know that. A listener told me that.
Just like a rookie prosecutor.
Either way, it made for your analysis very interesting on Giuliani and his situation.
Well, the bureau I was in at the Bronx DA's office was the Investigations Bureau, and it was basically, early on, you still get like little cases, but it would always be things that might be hooked up, whether it was guns or prostitution or gambling, things that might be hooked up into larger networks to build cases. So it wasn't always about the immediate arrest. So when you were saying, oh, is Giuliani, like, is he going to just walk for this? Is Gates just going to walk? And my thought with them was, you don't arrest Rudy Giuliani on like probable cause and then put the case together. You basically say, okay, we got him. We want this case. Like, this is a high profile person. We're not looking to be, because this isn't a matter of like, oh, he murdered somebody and we found the gun. We have enough to arrest him. This is a paperwork, phone calls, visits, transcripts. Like, so this is a case that can really probably be put together. And then when he's arrested, that's like step 9 of 10, as opposed to like, if you find the murder weapon, maybe that's step 2 of 10 or 3 of 10. And you test it and you interview witnesses and you can arrest, you have probable cause to arrest him. Then they could arrest Giuliani now, probably, is my guess, but you don't want a high profile screw up. When you have somebody of that nature, you basically want to just get him in and be able to say, here's what we have. Would you like to tell us about A, B, or C? Or would you like to cop a plea? Because we feel very confident in this case. Like, So I think that's why they haven't moved on him. I don't think it's because they're going to eventually just go, meh.
If they do move on him, do you think they'll move on him like a bitch?
Like a bitch? Yeah, I see where you're going.
What a horrible sentence that was.
Yeah, but I still feel bad for Billy Bush.
You do?
I mean, you know what? In the scheme of cancel culture,
you know why I don't feel bad for him? I'll tell you why I don't feel bad for him. Because
he's rich and a bush?
No, because when I was on Real Time with him, everybody said that I was too hard on him. And I said, I wasn't planning on being hard on that guy until during that conversation, he did not seem contrite about the way that he handled it. He could have taken that, and even if he didn't believe it, and turn it into something like virtuous, like, you know what, I learned my lesson. I shouldn't have been that way. I've got 2 daughters. He didn't. He was like, basically, I got a raw deal. It's like, well, fuck you then.
I just think, I have a joke about cancel culture where I go, I don't trust your cancel culture bona fides unless you were out there marching with me when the Black Eyed Peas had to change their song from Let's Get Retarded to Let's Get It Started. But Billy Bush, I just think that's so emblematic, though, of our... Oh, and then I said, no, and then the tag for me is, Will I Am? No, Will You Are a Coward, because Will I Am is one of the people in Black Eyed Peas. Anyway, that's why stand-up's better on stage in front of a crowd.
It's fine. Moving forward.
But Billy Bush, I still think it's very ironic, if that's the word, that like of the 2 people involved in the
he suffered consequences in Trump.
He suffered massive.
Well, but hold on. Doesn't that say a lot about the kind of the morality of our country? Meaning that's one example, but the other example, the far better example, is after 4 years of Donald Trump's horror, he got more votes than any president ever did, but the guy who beat him, and a lot more votes than he did the first time. After all of the horror, the daily horror of 4 years, he won more people over. What does that say about, who we are to some extent? Not all of us, but to, a large extent.
Yeah. I mean, to me, when people
we reward bad behavior.
When people say, is America, the question that Tim Scott answered, and then I understood Kamala Harris and Biden having to.
Is America a racist country?
Yeah. 75 million votes for Donald Trump. America is a racist country. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm not.
That's how you measure. I think that's a fair measurement right there.
It's not irredeemable. Yeah. It can grow. I don't know if I thought of this while I was listening to your show, or if somebody said it on your show. It starts to meld because you're listening.
We just know it couldn't have been me. But
stand up with Pete Dominic Daily, and I thought to myself, I said, no, somebody on your show, I think, said this. Okay, so now I'm not taking credit, but I maybe wanted to punch it up or something. But it was the idea of, like, if somebody has cancer, well, you don't write them off as a dead person. It doesn't mean they're dead. It means they have cancer. It means they have something in their system that has to be cured, eradicated, worked on. You can be a cancer survivor. You don't say, I never had cancer, or that I don't have to get checkups at the doctor. Once I've had cancer, you still have to get checkups. But for me, I wrote this tweet this weekend, I think, and it was I said, Donald Trump legitimately could have claimed, within the bounds of politics, I gave you the vaccine, go get the vaccine. I did that. Nobody's ever done that before. Get the Trump vaccine. I'll see you in 4 years. Let's get healthy. Let's get back. It's for the best for our country. Trump vaccine. I did that. And and they can't take that away from him. He did a lot of bad things, but he, I think out of laziness, prioritized vaccines. He didn't want to tell people to change their lives. He didn't want to be honest, but he felt like he could do the Steve Jobs joke by Bill Burr, which is like, I'm going to throw a ton of money and tell the guys to go do that.
I would push back a little bit against it.
No, I know, but
I don't. This is what
politics. I'm saying as a political argument.
As a political argument, yes, he could have said that. But just to be clear, he did nothing ever about anything, and the only thing he did is not interfere with his people putting a priority on the vaccine. Is what I would
understood.
give him that.
from, just like the president can take credit for the economy, no matter what we think causes the economy, when it's bad, it falls on their shoulders. When it's good, they get lifted up by it. Whether you, no, that's
no,
we live in the real world.
But you're talking about, you're saying if he had done this, if he could
have had the political license, that would have been acceptable in the realm of politics to say, I was presiding over this when we had this record vaccine production that is helping our country move on. Now, that would be an actual accomplishment. Like if a Trump supporter said, hey, we got the vaccines under Trump, you can argue with them, but they kind of have the big bullet point, which is like, that's true. It did happen under Trump. So did all the other shit. But okay, the fact that he doesn't promote it, that he doesn't encourage it, that he doesn't tell, like he gave one pithy statement, but that he's not out there even using it as a springboard to a 2024 run. I'm going to keep reminding people that when you're out there barbecuing, that vaccine that you should be getting, that was me. And the fact that his people loved him in spite of his non-accomplishments and don't even care about his arguable accomplishment, it is about bigotry, it is about hate, it's about division, and it is about, I don't want to say white insecurity, but something about that. And that's what's so scary, is because I genuinely can look at his base and go, it wasn't even about anything that he was doing, because he didn't do much. And the one good thing that you could say he did, you don't even want to get it. You don't even want to get the one thing he actually did that was arguably useful.
Well, it's a lot of people saying it seems there's a lot of truth is about seeing your political opponents be in pain. Liberal tears.
It's because there is this. It's very bizarre. It's sad and it's scary because it's like when Michael Biehn in The Terminator is referring to the Terminator and he says he can't be reasoned with, he can't be stopped. Like he will not stop until you are dead. That's kind of like what the Trump right is. Yeah. It's like they just want you to lose. Like they don't have there is a very like COVID like viral presence to the Trump Republican Party, which is like, oh, we don't have a brain, we don't care, we're here to destroy you.
Yeah.
Like you either have to use the vaccine of voting, which we are trying to shut down as well. If you don't use that, we're just going to keep multiplying and we're going to keep infecting our politics and our society until your side loses or dies.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's accurate analysis.
So, yes, MAGA is a virus.
Well said. It certainly is. And we'll see if it continues to spread or if there's any way to inoculate it. I'm just not sure how the latter is done. J.L. Cauvin this weekend, Thursday night in Virginia, Friday night in Virginia, Thursday Arlington, Friday Sterling, Saturday Rockville, Maryland, and see him in Hartford, Connecticut on June 10th at the Funny Bone there. Get those tickets now. He's been great to us throughout the pandemic. Always love talking with you. Always love having a conversation with you. And today, no exception. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Isn't he great? J.L. Cauvin, everybody. Check him out online, jlcauvin.com. Get his podcasts. I'm subscribed to his podcasts. Listening to Righteous Prick right now. How about that, JL? I'm listening to you talk about your trip to Boston. It's interesting and funny, as you always are in every medium that you embody, that you perform. Thank you very much for joining me. All right, up next is, I think, a really smart conversation with a very bright guy who I've always admired since I first met him when we worked together at SiriusXM on the POTUS channel. He was hosting a show, co-hosting a show about Twitter and politics, and it was great. And Slade is great. He is now the editor-in-chief of the ReCount, which you have to follow on Twitter. but he worked at Mike, and before that, Hyper Vocal, and like I said, SiriusXM. He started a whole lot of things, but now he is at the top of his game at the ReCount, which is doing very, very well. So I reached out to Slade. We had a great conversation, and I hope that you'll check out the show links to learn more about Slade, the ReCount, and his camp that he founded and runs every year. Check him out on Twitter at Slade, at SLADE. Here now, the first ever appearance on the Stand Up with Pete Dominic podcast. It's Slade Sohmer.
Although this is what I wear to the office anyway.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We're dressed alike. It's great to see you on the virtual.
It's great to see you.
Thank you for being on the podcast. I think it's been, I looked up to try to figure out the last time I talked to you like on the air. And so I'm looking through emails, and like one of the last emails I got was you canceling on me while at Sirius the day after the election of 2016 when Trump won.
Amazing. I was probably in a state of total confusion.
I was very thoughtful. You were very thoughtful. You're like, I'm so sorry. The election, surprised us, the whole newsroom, and I got a million things to do. And I was like, I completely understand.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that.
It was one of those things where I still, and I will go to the grave remembering the taxi home at 3:30 in the morning, the night of 2016.
Yeah, it's one of those crucible. Do you remember when? Where were you when? What would you say about that memory? What were your feelings? How were you?
Yeah, I mean, I was working at Mike.com at the time, and it was a very progressive newsroom, and I think I'd be willing to bet that 90% of people thought Hillary Clinton would be guaranteed to be the president of the United States. So and I was doing a Facebook Live at the time, Facebook, which is a social media platform. I'm not sure if you're familiar. They were really pushing lives. We were hosting a Facebook Live. And, the Needle and the New York Times Needle and all that stuff. And as the night wore on and people slowly were like, okay, what's happening here? And watching a lot of people in their 20s slowly slip into a state of depression in real time was interesting to watch.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I was at SiriusXM, and so I could make assumptions about what most people's politics were and post that. But what was it like to be in a very progressive workplace, and the time after that and the weeks and months that followed? That must have been just horrible.
Yeah, it was interesting. I will say this, we had a bunch of people in our newsroom who did think that Trump was going to win, and they were all almost to a person people of color. And it was fascinating for the week that followed of most of what we called our identities desk and most of our people of color on the news desk and elsewhere around the office were like, yeah, we told you this was going to happen. And our, white leadership being like, now we've got to make changes. We got to read J.D. Vance's books. We got to, or books singular, I guess, there was a lot of like soul searching amongst, kind of white leadership. Whereas, our employees of color were like, we told you this was happening. We've been reporting on this for a while. And this just goes to show you what our leadership thinks of our reporting. It was actually a very telltale moment for the Mike newsroom at the time.
What do you think? You're now the editor-in-chief of the ReCount. Mm-hmm. What is that for people who might not know? I feel like you and your team there have done such a great job in a short period of time to actually create a brand that people actually do know. They hear it and they go, "Oh yeah, I see their Twitter. What is that? What are they?" Is the question. Yeah,
exactly.
Who are you? Who are the people?
We're a 2-year-old startup. I think actually a year and a half in terms of our official launch. Our goal was very simple. We want to show you what's happening in the world in news and politics right now and why it matters, and put it into a little context, have a little smart narrative behind it. And we do that in various ways. We have some short form video. We do a recap every single day. We do a recap of the top stories you need to know. We have a wire service that cuts all the video in the world, domestic, international, federal, local, state, everything in between. We started as all politics. We've since moved on to full news and politics, business, tech. We like to say we're covering the corridors of power. So,
the tech companies are power now. There is power in sports. There is power in business. And we're trying to cover all that. We're trying to show you a full look of what's happening and why it matters. Most people, I would say 90% of people who have heard of the ReCount interact with us on Twitter and Instagram. But we also obviously have an app and a website. But most people interact with us on social, which is just fine with us.
So I want to ask you a few specific questions that especially the ones that you certainly are an expert to answer, and anything else, because I just love talking to you, and I love your take on all things pop culture, politics, you name it. But we're talking the day of the Facebook decision to keep Trump suspended. And so my question is, what do you think about those suspensions? Should they have happened earlier? And I'm talking about all the big social medias, which you've always covered and been involved with. And what do you think, as a second parter, about the Facebook decision to keep him banned? I guess I haven't read too much into it, but they decided he's still gone. Yeah.
So he's still banned. I'm going to answer the second question first, which is, it's important to keep in mind that this is a paid panel of mostly non-experts. Oh. This is an oversight board that was handpicked and paid by Mark Zuckerberg to make this decision, to essentially take the weight off of Mark Zuckerberg and, Sheryl Sandberg and whoever else is involved in that decision making. This does not have binding weight of law. There's no full faith and credit of a court behind this. This is a bunch of people who said, okay, right now we're going to say not allowed back on the platform. The decision to ban him is interesting. I fully believe that he was pushing dangerous misinformation. I also fully believe that he was the president of the United States. I couldn't even get that sentence out. He was the president of the United States. Whether or not he's misinformation, disinformation, whatever, he is, for all intents and purposes, the leader of the free world. I know a lot of people balk at that phrase, but it's usually true of the president. And to ban a United States president from, a private company's platform is interesting. It's a debate that I do not know the answer to. If I were in charge of Facebook, if I were in charge of Twitter, I'm not necessarily sure that I would have pushed him off the platform. The day after the election, that's a different story. I think you could push him straight out of everything, even before January 20th, from November 7th on. I think that they had every right to do what they did. While he was the active president of the United States, I'm not sure that I would have pulled the trigger and said, you're off the platform. I just don't know that you could do that. But that's just me. And I'm one guy, and I'm one white dude in media. And my decisions, thankfully, do not reign supreme in the law of the land.
Are you better than me as a white dude because you're gay and Jewish?
No, well, that's true.
I mean,
those things are both true.
You have those life experiences to draw from, and then I'm a straight white guy, so I don't have any of that. How do you?
I've never listened to you because of that. I've never listened to your shows, your opinions. None of that matters to me. But there's two things about.
But that's true. That's true of all the straight whites.
That's true. There are two things about that. One, I never truly identified a Jewish identity as a minority. Not to say that anti-Semitism is either old or new, but when I was growing up in the 80s, 90s, 2000s,
Where did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
This is exactly why. I grew up in Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a high school that was 80% Jewish. I grew up in a majority Jewish town. So for me, I never felt the sting of anti-Semitism. There was no one driving through our towns with, Nazi symbols. I didn't grow up in Skokie, Illinois with the Nazi march going down the street. For me, that is almost a recent development that anti-Semitism is hot again. And as far as the gay thing, I do believe I am someone who is of the opinion that to be a white gay is to still be a white man. Maybe that's too woke for some people, definitely Ted Cruz and Fox News and, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, I am still a white guy, and I've still been afforded privileges, regardless of the fact that my sexual orientation could provide me some discrimination. In my life, it has not necessarily manifested as such, which is why I always strive to empower, queers of color.
What do you think of that word woke and the movement that it's interesting because I feel like it was a word certainly created by black people, and now it is used by the far right crazy people as a pejorative, like so many other things.
I mean, America is really stoned at 2:00 in the morning in the dorm room, and you say a word and then it loses all meaning and nobody knows what that word means. That's where we're at right now. If Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and all the entirety of Rupert Murdoch's umbrella, if they could actively and successfully define the word woke, I'll give them all $1 million. Not that I have that kind of money. You certainly do. I'll give them your millions of dollars. I
work in a shed in my yard.
It's actually gorgeous. I'm
Thank
looking
you.
at your shed and I'm
Thank
jealous
you.
as hell.
I appreciate it.
Build me a shed, but I just don't think these people have any idea what they're talking about. Woke, cancel culture, cancel culture is summed up so easily. It's consequences for action. Josh Hawley talking about cancel culture while he's on the Washington Post live stream.
Yeah,
Josh Hawley talking about cancel culture while he's getting a book published. These things, it's the Mrs. White from Clue. It's like flames on the side of my face. Flames, that whole scene, Madeline Kahn, R.I.P. I just don't think that I have the words to express how effed up it is that these people are claiming, this wokeness is killing them or cancel culture is killing them, and they just cannot define it. It's such a broad umbrella. It's bullshit.
Well, that leads me to another kind of very topical question for you, which is it would be easy to define by how a lot of people use the word cancel what the Republican caucus in the House is doing to Liz Cheney.
Yeah, she's being canceled.
And it's interesting as to why, right? Like people are canceled, quote canceled, because they've said or done, things that really upset some people. I think most people can agree on that, whether you think it's okay or not. Usually it's because there's outrage somewhere about a thing, and we could debate on whether that thing was worth, quote, canceling them or really punishing them or having consequences, as you so rightly, I think, put it. But how would you describe what House Republicans are doing to the number 3, Liz Cheney, who you and I both have covered and understand her stances? She is the staunch conservative on foreign policy, on fiscal policy, on social issues. I mean, her own sister is gay. I mean, you could talk about what she did there, but what do you think about what the House Republicans are doing to her right now? What does it mean? What does it mean, Slade? I'm having a hard time understanding what this means for the future of the Republican Party on this issue.
Yeah, it's fun to watch, first and foremost. It's dangerous and it has broad consequences for the country, but it is also a little fun to watch, just a little bit. If I'm Liz Cheney, what I do is I come out and say, this is my party. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. You are not. You are some sort of MAGA party, whatever you are creating.
You're a cult.
Go start your own party. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. I think she's done a pretty good job of sticking up for herself. But at the same time, if I were to give her any advice, that's the advice that I would give. Her opinion does not differ from most of the conservatives on November 7th, on January 7th. After the 1-6 insurrection, most people in the Republican Party came out and said, what happened was bad, and this can never happen again. It's the fact that she didn't then circle back and continue to bend the knee towards this, like, we can't have an insurrection. And now it's a messaging problem. She's not being kicked out because she's too conservative. She's not being kicked out because she's a Republican. She's not being kicked out of leadership, of course. She's not being kicked out of leadership because of her opinion on the insurrection or her opinion on Donald Trump and the big lie. She's being kicked out because she refuses to carry the messaging of Trump and the big lie forward, which to me is the issue at hand.
More succinctly, she's being removed from power because she refuses to lie about a thing that is not debatable that happened.
Yes, and that everyone who is continuing that lie is on board with her initial opinion about it. That's the crazy thing.
You stopped yourself when you said she's not being kicked out. She's being removed from, potentially voted out by leadership, which is their right to do. They can decide whoever they want their leaders. But I do think it's probably true what you stopped yourself from saying, in that if you look at it, her being primaried in that state that might not really shouldn't be a state based on their population, of Wyoming, like because of this stance, also the Republicans in Wyoming, I don't know if they've censured her or reprimanded. I'm imagining though that they no longer think that they're going to primary her as a result of this. I bet.
Will absolutely primary her. And, elections are the ultimate cancel culture. Every 2 years we get together and we decide which politicians we want to, keep in the culture and cancel.
So I agree with you that it's entertaining, but also horrifying, because it's really getting me concerned to think about that Trump still has a stranglehold on the party in terms of this one lie. And what it means is that the future of confidence in elections is suspect. Our democracy, the idea that democracy doesn't matter, these bigger questions. And then specifically, you can see this playing out as it extends to things like COVID and vaccines. Yeah. And if you don't believe the election is the point I'm trying to make, outcome is what it is, because they're telling you to not believe what you see and hear, then you're also not going to believe in other really important things, Slade. And that's my biggest concern, is what we've seen is this disconnection to actual reality, not opinions or morals. We can argue about that all day, like whether or not you should be able to hit your kid with a piece of wood in 19 states. We can argue about that, but we can't argue about that is happening. These are things that are happening. What does it mean?
Yeah, I mean, I will walk back a little bit that this is entertaining from a, non-Republican sense. This is dangerous.
It's entertaining to see a Cheney get eaten up by the machine it led and created. I'll say that.
Yes. The problem with this is that for all the talk of lefty progressive purity tests, who agrees with Bernie Sanders, who agrees with AOC, where are you on $15 minimum wage? Where are you on climate change? The real purity test that is underway right now in this country is, will you buck reality and believe the bullshit that we have to spin in order to keep power for our party? That is essentially what is happening with Republicans these days. And I don't say that as a lefty, a progressive. I'm saying this objectively. You objectively have to believe in absolute conspiracy theory to be a member of the Republican Party these days. I used to work in conservative talk radio back in the 2000s. This was a 1%, 2%, 5% slice of the Republican Party. People who called into radio shows, who said that Obama was from Kenya, who said that hands off my health care, while they're on Medicare, by the way, Medicare and Medicaid. This was a very small slice of the public because of Facebook, because of Twitter, because of amplified voices on social media. The audience for this stuff became a much bigger swath of the conservative movement. Now it's 20%, 25%, 30%. And now if you are a politician, it's the old story of where are my people going so I can lead them. That's exactly what is happening right now. The leadership, the elected officials in the Republican Party, to get in front of this now huge swath of conservatives, they now have to believe this bullshit. So they might not believe the earth is flat, but they have to fundraise off the fact that the earth is flat.
Yeah, I think it's always been true that right-wing media has been extremely influential in conservative policy making at the state, local state, and obviously national level. It's always been the case that Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity led the Republican Party for years, I think. And I'm generally speaking, and there's never been any equivalent like that on the left in almost any way. Certainly not in one or two or a handful of personalities. But when I'm hearing you say that, I'm also thinking, I wonder, when you look back at some of those things they used to say about birtherism and so on, that stuff got very popular because they said it, because Rush said it and others, bought it. Just what you're saying. But now I wonder, you think about, I want to talk obviously more about media with you. You think about a show like, I don't know if you ever knew this, when I was at Sirius, they had that show Coast to Coast, like aliens and ghosts and stuff. That stuff's entertaining as hell. It's great. It's entertaining as hell. Conspiracy theory is entertaining. But I think what I'm hearing you're saying, what I'm thinking is, you could do an experiment If you were Tucker Carlson, I guess he does every night. You could say the craziest possible thing ever. Ted Cruz's dad killed JFK.
Sure.
No, actually, something crazier than that. And there would be an audience for it. People would believe it. It doesn't matter how crazy. This is what I'm trying to say. How crazy of a thing these people say. People will continue to believe it. The QAnon stuff is all unbelievable. But what does that? So what does that mean for the wider, public in terms of trying to get important things done for anyone, anywhere? If people don't, they'll believe anything.
Yeah, well, it's tough.
How do you counter it, too? I don't want to just be dour. I mean, that's what you're trying to do at the ReCount.
Right. So the counter to it is what Joe Biden is doing. And I do not say this as someone who's in the tank for Joe Biden. I want to make clear to everyone listening right now, I am a journalist. I am not in the tank for Joe Biden or the Democratic Party.
Your whole office is littered with Biden signs. You have a Biden hat and T-shirt on, but go ahead, sir. No, he's in a bare naked office and a Grateful Dead hoodie. Go ahead. What is he doing? What is Biden doing?
So Joe Biden's strategy is to get up there and spout popular policies in the most boring way possible and say that this is what we're doing right now. And that, to me, is the only way to almost ignore, let other people fight this out. Let the people on Twitter and let the people on Facebook and let people who don't have actual power fight out the culture war issues, fight out the conspiracies, fight out that stuff. What I'm going to do is put forth at this point now 3 multi-trillion-dollar proposals, talking about $6 trillion in spending, that is mostly popular, that are polling very strongly. We saw this morning, there was a Politico morning consult poll that showed, almost, 3 out of 5 people are on board with the American Families Plan, just as they were with the infrastructure plan and the spending plan. And because, we won Georgia, not me being Joe Biden, because, Joe Biden's saying because we won Georgia and because we have a 50-50 Senate and because we still do have a little margin in the House, we can pass these things. And then at the end of the day, stand up and say, are you with us or are you with people who believe that sex trafficking, baby eating, all these things? Who are you with? At the end of the day, who do you want to stand with? I'm trying to get high-speed rail. I'm trying to get childcare. I'm trying to tax the 1%. There was a study that came out today that said 0.7% of people will be affected by Joe Biden's tax plan on this. Who do you want to stand with at the end of the day? Again, I'm not endorsing anything involved in this. This is what Joe Biden's thinking, and I think it is the right call at the end of the day. If you could get 50, 60% on board with you on that, it doesn't matter what the other 40% are doing. Yes, it does on the local level and on the state level. You're right to talk about state legislatures. That it's huge. I mean, 2010 to me is the biggest election of our lifetime. That's when Obama lost the midterms and 640 net seats went to Republicans. Every single legislature basically went Republican and some went supermajority. And then all of a sudden you had abortion restrictions and LGBT rights were stripped and all that kind of stuff. So yes, that matters. But on a national level, Biden's plan is to say, block out the haters, block out that noise. Let's get back to popular plans that people like, that people can see in their paychecks and on their dinner tables, and who's going to watch their kids and all this stuff. That's my take on it.
No, I think it's a great take. I think, again, to look back at what you just said, it's like if you actually give people, make concrete changes in people's lives, end the pandemic, make sure they get a job, a better job, make sure they have money to take care of their family. That is going to make a bigger difference in someone's life than some messaging war, something that you can say, or that the critics of Biden can say, which is why this stuff is.
Just say on top of that, like I participate in the culture war. I'm not above it, again, as a gay man, to go back to it, like the culture war about gay issues, and now it's about trans issues. I believe in that. I believe that is a human rights issue more than it's a culture war issue, although it is always spinned in the media as a culture war issue. But like, this is all new. We didn't get marriage rights until 6 years ago. Not that I'm a, big marriage, proponent or whatever, but from marriage equality stems other rights. Up until the Supreme Court decision, it was You could get married to your first cousin in more states than you can get married to your same-sex partner. You know, these to me are important issues and worth standing up for. So I believe in culture war issues. I believe in First Amendment issues. I believe that you should be able to, you know, do some shit on TV, that drugs should be legal, that prostitution should be legal, that all this sex work, you know, all this stuff should be legal. This to me is like human rights. But you know, if it's going to be billed as culture war stuff, I believe in it. If it's QAnon that is billed as culture war, well, then that is complete bullshit. And you look at people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is talking about sex trafficking and all this stuff, and now her best friend is Matt Gaetz. You know, how do you square that circle? How do you square the circle of caring so much about sex trafficking and you know, who's sleeping with minors, and then Matt Gaetz, who is accused of this credibly, is now your partner in crime, literally. You know, it doesn't make sense, and there's nothing. You know, these people have had a psychotic break, and there is nothing that is going to bring back probably 15 to 25% of this country.
But there is a thing that makes them less active. If they're less afraid, if they're less concerned about things because there's no pandemic, because they have health insurance, they have a job, they're less likely to be more vehement, more concerned. I think maybe around the edges, but also interesting that Matt Gaetz is not being forced out, but Liz Cheney is.
Liz Cheney is. Incredible. That's a good point.
I want to ask you two more big questions. And one is just, I want to talk about black people because there are none here. And I want to, from the vantage point of you in media and someone who can hire people and basically what you've seen in your life, I think a lot about the civil rights movement and the black folks who led that and how they did it and what they accomplished and so on and how far we've come. And that's what I kind of want to ask you about, because my observation is that the difference between this 21st century civil rights movement or Black Lives Matter movement versus the 60s is that black folks have a lot more power and a lot more stake. And we can talk about all the systemic and institutional racism and so on, but like, at your workplace, at my, you know, former workplace, I work alone in a shed now, but I talk to a lot of black people all the time. And my point is they have so much more power. There's so much more education. They have so much more money, resources, and they're taking advantage of that. Like they're not, I don't want to say anything negative about the black folks who led the civil rights movement of the 60s. I'm saying these young people especially have so much more power and the ability to organize, especially using social media. And it's created a lot of change. And I wonder what you think about young black folks that you're working with today and how their voices are mattering in terms of really creating change and, frankly, saving the world in the Georgia runoff. I mean, that was led by young black people who got organized and older black folks who got organized, also even to get Joe Biden elected, led by, you know, Clyburn in South Carolina, one could argue. What do you think about this generation of active young black folks who have more resources and capital and stake and power and what they're able to achieve? Because I do think we do have a vantage point as white folks working with them and trying to advocate as allies. What do you think?
Yeah, well, you know, I do think that the system is still unfairly balanced towards white folks
in so many ways, for sure.
Yeah, or towards, you know, white passing folks even, you know, and I would even add that, you know, this goes back to, you know, Doug Jones and Roy Moore. You know, that was another election where black women saved the day. You know, there are a lot of examples of this. Two things I think you could separate here. One is voice, and the other is education and you know, getting that opportunity. On the education front, I will say, you know, young black women are getting the majority of degrees in America, and black people in general are getting more degrees. This is a fact. However, they're also being saddled with a lot of debt. So, you know, when we talk about the student debt issue, we are also talking about a black issue, not just, you know, obviously there's poor white people, there's poor Latino people, there's poor Asian, you know, there's poor everyone.
Well, there's a lot of all people are saddled with that, but it's disproportionate for black folks because of the wealth inequality, exactly. I think is what you're saying. Yeah, exactly.
So while we are getting more black people into our education systems, we are also saddling them with an incredible amount of debt.
Great point. Yeah,
so I do want to put that out there.
Yeah, that's a great point, illustrated by this young reporter in Michigan who just talked about how she's a great reporter. She's worked really hard, but she's had these advantages where she went to college, her parents paid tuition, and after college they paid some of her bills, and like that. That's a difference in terms of wealth inequality, in terms of what your family's generational wealth is and what they have to be able to help you out. Whereas black folks, and again, I'm generalizing here, are more likely to have to kind of crowdsource those things and get money from a lot of different places for all types of things, much less college education. So that's a really great point that you're making to illustrate. Yeah, that's college debt. What was the other one?
So on the voice front, you and I talked a little offline about, social media, more pegged to the Trump thing. But, look, I think in many ways Twitter is like a garbage fire, and, Facebook's a garbage fire, and all these things. The one thing that I will say, though, is that social media has amplified minority voices, has amplified people of color in a way that is a net positive over the fact that you're having arguments over, literally anything on these platforms. It took television in the 60s to show people the injustices of what was going on in the civil rights era. It took, the Pettus Bridge. It took, these things happening on TV.
Yeah.
Sadly, it took television to do these things. What we're seeing now is different, but is similar in the way that you saw George Floyd's execution on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, wherever it was. The voices that sprung up around last June, last July, around those protests, they took place on social media because you kept seeing these videos, you kept seeing the injustice. And then, you have enough people out there. You do have a lot of people of color who have outsized voices in a very good way. And then also now you have enough white people who are saying, like, I will choose to amplify this voice.
Yeah.
I will choose to amplify that voice. And in a good way, and not to use the word woke again, but you do have enough woke white people who know that this is not their place to necessarily, own the conversation. And this is my approach to hiring as well. I've hired well over 100 people in my career in 4 newsrooms that I've, built and run over the last 4 years. And to a T, I'm not a quota guy, I'm not whatever, but I do choose to amplify voices of traditionally marginalized communities, be it Black, be it brown, be it gay, be it trans, whatever it is. I choose to amplify those voices. I want people in the newsroom who, if I say something stupid or think something stupid, that they can say, this is not my learned experience. This is not my friend's learned experience.
And then you immediately fire them.
Yes, exactly. I mean, they need to learn not to talk to me like that. But it is true in the way that, like, newsroom representation, newsroom diversity is not about numbers. It's not about filling a chair. It's not about any of that. It's about framing. It's about framing stories. To frame stories in the right way, you need true representation. You need, more women. You need more people of color. You need more people of different sexualities and gender identifying. This is stuff you need to run a 21st century newsroom. And that's just where I come out.
Which is why I have so much diversity on my staff here in the shed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intersectionality in
the pictures behind you are just white people. Like,
those are all of me. Yeah. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This is like one that I'm going to start asking a lot of people, I think, in interviews, because I'm really interested in it. And I think it's maybe you have some data. You have probably a lot of people might, but it's really a kind of a personal experience. I mean, you're sitting there in this corporate office building in Manhattan, Brooklyn. And I wonder what you think of, kind of what your pandemic experience has been in terms of what you've learned, especially as the editor-in-chief of the ReCount. Like people talk about Zoom fatigue and all these other things, but like, what's the difference between working together with people and working virtually? And more importantly, I think, what do you think's happening right now with corporate culture and just the actual space, the physical space that we work in terms of office buildings, anything on that? I'm really interested in what we're seeing change as a result of the way that we've been living over the past over a year.
Yeah. So
and working.
The one caveat to this that I would throw out there is that, the ReCount is about 45 employees, about 25 of which are editorial. So we're not a big company. We're not a big corporate culture. We're a literal startup in which I was the first employee and was able to create a culture that I wanted to work in. And that culture is mostly summer camp because that's the only mode I have is camp counselor, So here's the thing that when people ask me this question, here's my standard response. Productivity did not go down by any stretch of the imagination. I think creativity did. So do I think the ReCount is a creative place? Do I think the ReCount is a productive place? Yes to both questions. But the creativity that we had when we were all sitting next to each other, we were watching the impeachment hearing on television and, we're able to say oh, throw that clip in. Here's we're going to put this up against this. That kind of stuff in the room was so much easier than slacking somebody. I actually think at the ReCount, and you might find this, you might not. We don't necessarily have Zoom fatigue. I think we have Slack fatigue. The amount of messaging or whatever messaging service you use, the amount of messaging that is done on a daily basis is just so much higher than it is when you're actually seeing somebody. And that takes a toll on the human brain. I probably, if I were to count the number of Slack messages that I've gotten while I've been on with you for 37 minutes, it's probably in the 50s. 60s.
Oh, it's giving me anxiety. That's giving me email's hard enough for me.
Off this, terrible call and now go to, and review all the Slack messages that I've received. And it's true of all the people who work at the ReCount. You're constantly trying to do your work and message people and keep an eye on the broader view and watch 37 feeds of Governor DeSantis is talking and the Rochelle Walensky is talking and, Biden's up in 10 minutes and, Facebook's doing a press conference and this and that and this and that. And to monitor all this stuff at the exact same time, the ReCount, we bill ourselves almost as a panopticon, that we see everything, take everything in and then spit back at you what matters. To do all that while you are on a Zoom, while you're on Slack, while you are messaging 100 people, it just wears down the human brain. And then this is the last thing I'll say about it is then you have no work-life separation. You're on the couch where you sit. At least most of our employees are in New York or New York City or, somewhere thereabouts. In an office culture, you pack up at the end of the day, whatever time it is. If it's 5 for you, great. If it's 6 for you, great. If it's 7 for you, great. Whatever that is, then you go home, you go get a drink, you go kiss your loved one, you go feed your cat.
I would go train for a triathlon or something. That's what I would do.
You look like you're in great shape, by the way.
I look that way.
Yeah. It's but now I finish the workday, I shut my computer, and then I'm still sitting exactly where I was.
Right.
So that also takes a toll on you. I live in a 400 square foot apartment. It's
so you're going into this office as an exercise for you to have that line. Yeah, that's why you 100%. Do it.
The ReCount gave up its office space. I rent space out of, my brother-in-law's got an office that I'm renting space out of just to get the hell out of the house. I also my partner and I, we love each other to death. We've been together 13 years, but we've seen each other, for the first month or for the first year of the pandemic, we didn't get a second away from each other, which, believe it or not, still no fights, all good.
No fights, none.
No fights. In 13 years, we've never had an actual fight.
Come on, Slade. I wish you would have told me that a half an hour ago. That's all I would talk about. Next episode. Yeah, and bring him.
And we could discuss it. I think we're just too stoned all the time to fight each other or whatever.
I would love to talk to you guys about that.
All right.
I find that always a little bit weird, though.
People will say, well, if you're not fighting, you're not doing something right. Which look, that's all, you're fine on that. I think for us, we value different things together. We don't value, going at each other. We don't value dependence on each other. We don't value certain things. We value independence. If I literally left my apartment and didn't come home for 4 days, he would be like, hey, all good? With nothing, just hey, all good, and vice versa. those little things contribute to a very healthy, successful relationship, in my opinion.
Well, that's crazy. I want to dig into that. All right. Thank you very much, Slade. I'll let you get back to Slack, and it's so great to catch up with you and see you, and I really appreciate you joining me. So that was great.
I do want every one of your listeners to know real quick that you and I have known each other for almost a decade. You were the great lead into a short-lived radio show that I had on SiriusXM, and having that was such a security blanket. You are a true pro. You've always been one of my favorite voices, and I thank you very much for having me on.
That's very kind. I immediately realized that you were a smart guy who's really talented and well-connected, and I was like, I want to get on that train and see where this guy goes. And it's been great to watch you go from, create a whole bunch of amazing things. Keep up the good work, and I really appreciate you joining me. And everybody, if you haven't checked out the ReCount, if you're not following them on Twitter, do it now. All the links in the show notes. Thank you, sir.
All right, man. Take care. Love you.
There he goes, Slade Sohmer, for the first time on Stand Up. That's at Slade on Twitter. And yeah, after I spoke with him the other day, I found out that he was also the co-director of a really cool one-week camp for inner city kids called Camp Power, hosted at Tyler Hill Camp in Pennsylvania. And I'll have to talk about that the next time. But just mention that to just point to how good of a guy he is. Not something that I even knew about him, and I found that out later on. Check out the ReCount and check out Slade on Twitter and thank him for joining me here. And I thank you now for joining me here on Stand Up. Stand Up with Pete Dominick is a daily podcast, and it's powered by you. So please sign up for a paid subscription for as little as $5 or more. You can always edit your pledge up right now. Go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. Give me a review on Apple Podcasts, please. And check out my sponsor, Indeed.com/standup. If you're hiring, go to Indeed.com. I can't even say my sponsor's name. It's late and tired. Indeed.com/standup. Check it out. That'd be great if you went over there and checked out that link. And that is all I've got for you today. Here now, Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter, Stand Up with Pete Dominick, VIP member, the great John Carroll. Take us away, John.
Stand up, you gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. While you lying awake wondering where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.